I'm Rhett Power with Inc.com, and I'm with Julie Hanna today from Kiva. She's the board chair at Kiva, and she also works at the White House on entrepreneurship. And thank you for joining me today. Thank you for sitting down with Inc. and our readers. And I want to know a little bit about your story is very, very compelling. Immigrant, it was a tough time when you did come to the United States. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that influenced your life and how that sort of set you on a course for what you're doing today? Really?
Yes, thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I think connecting the dots on my life in hindsight gave me insights into how my journey to the front lines of the tech revolution and began on the front lines of war, how that had happened. And one thing I came to realize is that maybe the most hopeful truth that I know is that one dream can transform a million realities, and that in many ways that's all that ever has, and that it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what injustices you face, dreams don't discriminate.
Right.
And they liberate us from all prejudice. And so I realized that in many ways with my experiences, having been a refugee of 2 wars, immigrating to the US, that the gift in the adversity that I faced was that it taught me to dream of a better future. And in some ways those dreams saved me. And it helped shape my philosophy around, I dreamt of a world that recognizes that talent is universal but opportunity isn't. And that really gave me a passion for creating fair access. It made me, when I studied computer science, and I came to view technology through the lens of democratization, and I believe today it's the most democratizing force in the history of humankind, and that it has the potential to enable a fair access to folks like my family that couldn't get it, that it gives just a little bit of power, puts it into the hands of people that don't have power. So that's how my journey has shaped my work. All the companies that I built in Silicon Valley, and certainly my work with Kiva, has been around democratization, including democratizing entrepreneurship in and of itself.
Right.
The brand that we practice here in Silicon Valley, exporting that to other parts of the country, other parts of the world. Certainly Kiva is all about democratizing access to capital and uplifting entrepreneurs that are overlooked, underserved in the riskiest parts of the world and here at home. So that's the red thread in my life.
Right. I was in Kenya last year, and I actually work in South Africa quite a bit in Lesotho. And I see there's a lot of, there's 75 million young people around the world who are unemployed. Is entrepreneurship the answer? And how does the government, how can government support that role? How does private business encourage entrepreneurship? What do you think?
It is an answer, and it is a powerful answer. Like everything in life, there's no silver bullet, but it is a very powerful tool. And in some ways, I think what's happened with technology, it is returning us to that entrepreneurial instinct that I believe we all have as human beings fundamentally. As Dr. Muhammad Yunus says, we're all entrepreneurs. We were entrepreneurs when we were in the cave having to sort of fend for ourselves.
Right.
And it was more when Industrial Revolution came along that specialized us and said, oh, you're good at this, you're good at that, that we sort of maybe disconnected from that instinct. So, there's a massive potential there for people to uplift themselves. There's something inherently empowering with Kiva. What we see when the entrepreneurs get their loans, particularly women who've been in really tough situations, how dignity building and empowering those loans are when they become a business owner. So it has a psychic benefit that's tremendous, as well as an economic advantage. What governments can do, I think a lot of it often has to do with actually removing hurdles and friction and roadblocks along the way. Some countries you can start a business just like that, and others it can take months, maybe years to get going. So a lot of it has to do with sort of removing impediments as well as support.
Okay. And I want to talk to you just a moment about mobile technology, if you don't mind. Mobile money is really taking off in the developing world. Do you see that maybe catching on in the United States? Do you see it changing the landscape here as well?
You know, one of the beautiful things about the power of technology is the leapfrog effects that can happen.
Right.
So, you know, you've spent time in Kenya when one of the most inspiring things I've ever seen was years ago when my first trip to Kenya, going to the remotest parts of the country and seeing the ubiquity of M-Pesa. Right. And just in settlements that didn't have indoor plumbing, much less indoor banking or any kind of technology, but there was M-Pesa being used, and it looked like a window. I realized it's a window into our future here in the West. And so I think that we are certainly on that path. The leapfrog effects, because the need is so great in areas that have been sort of left behind, so to speak, in the last cycle, are that much more powerful. But I definitely think and I actually think we're going to look back much in the way that we look at networking. Used to be when networking came along, everybody had their own little network island. They were islands, they didn't talk to each other. And now the idea of that is crazy with the internet. I think largely we're going to look back at currency in the same way, that we will think, oh, remember those times when everybody had their own and they didn't talk to each other, and the idea of global currencies, and if anything is right for digitization or virtualization, it's money. And I think we'll look back and kind of say, wow, yeah, of course. You know, who knows? We always overestimate the short-term impact of technology, but we tend to underestimate the long-term impact. So I think that's very much in our future.
Indeed. I have to get this quote right. You talked about connected capital, and you said your dream is that we will find a way to bring humanity to business, and business to all of humanity. What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that the way bringing humanity to business is about returning business, which is one of our most powerful instruments or mechanisms for uplifting humanity. When we lead with our humanity in our practice of business, we create values-driven businesses, we create purpose-driven businesses, we keep our humanity at the forefront. And I think that's kind of a return to the origin of business. Bringing business to all of humanity is about looking and saying, in the economic systems that we take for granted, where we benefit from business, how do we bring that advantage to the entire world? You know, my dream is, how do we reach 1 billion entrepreneurs? I'm very proud of what we've achieved at Kiva. In 10 years, we've reached 2 million entrepreneurs with nearly $1 billion in capital. The repayment rate has held at 97%, which, you know, it proves and teaches the world that our ideas of risk capital maybe are narrow. So the idea of bringing business to all of humanity says, how do we give all of humanity those advantages of business that we take for granted?
What final question?
And just to add a little bit, so I think there's a virtuous cycle that happens when we do both of those things, which is why I talk about them in that way. And that, you know, I think our future as a planet and our humanity depends on us doing those things. And the integration of those two. And I think it's a very exciting time because we're moving towards a future where we do integrate our humanity with our thoughts about business and technology. And, you know, with business and technology, we have the most powerful tools ever invented in the history of our existence. And at the same time, we face the greatest threats to our existence.
Indeed. And
so we have this unique opportunity to marry the power of technology and business to solve our biggest challenges, and that is also about bringing humanity to business.
Indeed, I agree wholeheartedly. Final question, and I'll let you go. I want to speak to the young entrepreneur out there that's struggling, maybe he's failed. You've a business veteran, long-time business person. Talk a little bit about failure and talk a little bit about how to persevere. Maybe a story from your past where you had to get through something really tough and how you did it and how you coped with it.
So, you know, I've come to think of that adversity is a muscle that is, and it is the superpower of being an entrepreneur, that your ability to cope with adversity, to deal with uncertainty, is the superpower of being an entrepreneur. And so when the struggle comes along, I always remind myself of that. And there's these moments where you can kind of sit and feel sorry for yourself and kind of say, like, this is so hard, when is it going to get easy? This is kind of human nature to do that. And in those moments, I remind myself, no, this is a gift. This is like going to the gym, and I exercise a muscle, and it burns like crazy, and it gets stronger. And the things that have come into my life from the time I was young, the gift of the adversity has taught me to develop that muscle, and that is an advantage when you're an entrepreneur. So that always sort of keeping that in mind helps us get through those times, and also helps. Sometimes I think a lot of our suffering comes from the expectation we shouldn't struggle. Right. But if we accept the fact that struggle is a part of the entrepreneurial journey, then you start to kind of develop a little bit more flexibility. And I remind myself with people that inspire me, that remembering that Steve Jobs was fired from Apple, and that set him on a path of the most creative period in his life.
Remembering he built later on.
Exactly.
Right?
Remembering Al Gore, lost the presidential election and went on to have even greater impact and win the Nobel Peace Prize around, his work in climate change. Remembering Thomas Edison's perspective, I haven't failed, I found 10,000 ways that won't work. So those are some of the things that help me sort of keep working out that muscle.
I think it's something that you grow into. I've in my business, and I've failed and I've succeeded, and it seems that for me, you mature into handling stress and handling failure over time. You get better at it, I guess.
You do. I think some of us have circumstances that work. Those of us that get confronted with circumstances early in life, it's hard to see them as a gift, but it's like you start to learn those lessons earlier. I think one of the things that it's taken me the better part of a lifetime to realize is that just because your circumstances are broken doesn't mean you're broken.
Right.
And that actually, again, the gift in having broken circumstances is in learning how to get through them, and then you have an advantage over the people that you work alongside who may have looked like they've had everything good happen to them. But the first time they hit friction, they don't know what to do, and then you do, and so there's the gift in that.